Proportional Response, Book 1. Chapter 19, Part 6, Accusations of Treachery. Kaslo had to work very hard not to sigh or roll his eyes. He had to work even harder to keep from reaching forward and shutting off the microphone of the ambassador, standing there bloviating about the inherent virtues of our human allies and the evils wrought by the Zoltan over the centuries. This guy isn't even from a nation which has ever been a serious player and has mostly been ignored by everyone else, but he talks like his orange ass has personally been in the vice for every single the Zoltan misdeed. He is just as tiring as the damned reptilian slur who went before him, even though he is on our side. Maybe even worse than the Esla. That jerk tried to keep his exaggerations of human wrongdoing at least somewhat associated with reality. He looked around the chamber and found everyone had obviously grown bored, and a few ambassadors nodding off. He then checked the time and found that the guy had been prattling on for just over an hour. He sighed a little to himself. I gave the Slar an hour and a half, I guess I. Text began to scroll across his contacts. Enable. Okay, let me deal with this. I have dealt with the Ogfors enough, and this idiot in particular. People do like their kind in general. Most are friendly and enjoy being helpful, if a little mischievous. They also find chocolate more addictive than most species. This one, however, just likes to hear himself talk, and if we don't cut him off soon, people will think we are favoring the humans. Kaslo drummed his fingers on his legs to type back. Kaz, go for it. Please. Enibal stood, stepped forward to the controls and gave him a wry smile before he hit a button for attention. The HFY ambassador shot an annoyed look at them when the 2-minute warning lit up on his console, but the look softened when he saw Enibal standing there instead of Kaslo. How does the little twerp do that? I mean, I get people to like me easily enough, but he can get away with things even with people who don't particularly like him. I keep learning more reasons he was put in this position, most of which will also make him an excellent father to the royal brat. That last thought stirred a lot of others, comparing himself and his siblings to the general difficulty of dealing with the Chamber of Bellies, as he'd come to call it in the privacy of his household, that he decided he didn't want to consider too closely. It only took 5 more minutes for the ambassador to wind up his remarks and float his platform back to its appointed position. Next, Enibal recognized the newly and properly confirmed Kothro ambassador. With that, Enibal sat back down, effectively returning control to him. Emnon spoke in a voice of quiet steel. I believe the virtues of humanity have been sufficiently extolled at this point. The remark brought a round of soft laughter from most of the chamber, even from most of the Zoltan allies, and only a mild look of reproof from the Ogfor ambassador. Well, maybe they really are as good-natured as Enibal claims. The Bullmaster continued. I will instead speak to the unprovoked and unprecedented acts of war perpetrated by the Zoltan militaries against the Kothro, and our reasons for joining the war. Kaslo studiously kept his irritation off of his face as he interrupted. Ambassador Emnon, I appreciate your concern on that front and your desire to make your grievances plain, but I must interrupt you. This session is about the actions of the Altans against the nearly defenseless Gorful and Ronana. We can schedule another session. Emnon held up a large hand and nodded gravely. Of course, forgive me, Honorable Duke. I am a warrior and not used to trying to make my points with words. The man smiled broadly and rubbed a finger on the point of one of his horns, eliciting another round of amused noises from the ambassadors before he continued. That said, I do wish to make a germane point, and will attempt to be brief. The Zoltan ambassador made a great many claims about how the actions of their military leaders were misunderstood and have been taken out of context or blown out of proportion. Sadly, none of the systems which were rescued by humanity had certified recordings of what transpired, and so the Zoltan ambassador is within his rights to demand that they be excluded from these proceedings. My own people, however, learned long ago that important stations should always have certified recorders running, and have enough redundancies in those systems that the electronic warfare attempts by the electronic hit by the Zoltan military to corrupt the recordings failed. And so I will stand witness to all of you now. Every accusation made against the Zoltans are true. The Zoltan ambassador began to frantically try to take the floor, finally resorting to sending out a text message to everyone in the chamber, accusing Emnon of telling bold-faced lies. Emnon looked up at the reptile and gave a chilling smile almost worthy of a human.
Ambassador, I would remind you that this session was placed under penalty of perjury, and we all speak under oath. This looks an awful lot like an accusation of perjury to me. Of course, if it was such, and I was able to prove my point, and prove that it would be unreasonable for you to believe that I wasn't telling the truth, then the charge of perjury would fall to you, and we would need to have a hearing of censure against you, if I understand the rules of engagement for these chambers.
Another ripple of emotion spread through the crowd at Emnon's wording, some amused, some annoyed. Kasler himself found he felt both emotions, but didn't have the chance to dwell on them as the bull continued.
Of course, a lot would be at stake for you in such a hearing. You could even be ejected as unfit to sit on the council, if I understand correctly.
Kasler had to suppress a smile as the Kothro turned to face him and continued.
Ambassador Kasler, could you please activate the good Sultan Ambassador's microphone so that he may, if he wishes, level his accusations formally and properly?
Kasler nodded gravely and hit the button to allow the lizard to turn his mic on if he wished. Then, man simply shook his head and sat back in his chair, pretending to pick at specks on his robes and ignoring everyone. No Sultan voter would back down from a challenge that way. They wouldn't dare. No wonder they sent a non-voter this time. He looked back down at Emnon and spoke.
It seems that no one wishes to challenge your statements at this time.
Another ripple of amusement, this one with a hard edge to it, worked its way through the chamber as he continued.
However, you have made some bold claims, Ambassador. I assume you wish to present evidence to this council.
Emnon nodded solemnly and hit some buttons on his console. Kasler nearly moved to stop the man, but found he didn't need to. The Bullmaster had sent the authentication and verification codes for his evidence, not attempted to present it before the council. Smart. Subtle as a 5-pound sledge, but smart. I'm glad this guy's on our side. Kasler's screen lit up too with the verification of the codes, since Enable had run the necessary programs while he stood there ruminating. A glance around the council chamber showed that most had done the same. Emnon just stood there, waiting patiently, obviously very sure of the outcome. That should about do it. I think everyone who is going to bother to check has already done so.
Honored ambassadors, most of you have already run the checks required to verify Emnon's evidence. I will admit to you that I am satisfied with the results, and I'm well aware that I could, as presenter for this hearing, simply allow them to be entered into evidence myself. However, since this evidence is likely to be used again outside of this meeting for other purposes, I will put the matter to a general vote. Shall we allow this evidence to be entered into the official record?
By the time he got the tally displayed on the chamber wall, the votes had already been cast. One thing did surprise him. There were no dissenting votes. The Exalted Ambassador had abstained. A few others had as well. The usual fence, minus Sitters, and Henry. Kasler almost did a double take, then had to suppress a smile. Of course he would abstain, the wily bastard. Kasler squared his shoulders and turned video control of the chamber over to Emnon.
Very well. It appears that we have at least the simple majority required.
Another ripple of dark amusement ran through the chamber. No one wanted to vote against obviously verifiable evidence.
To enter this evidence into the general record for this council, Ambassador Emnon, you have the floor.
With that, Kasler sat down and let Emnon speak. The Bullmaster said very few words and let the video speak for itself. After the video finished, however, the lights in the chamber did not come back up. Another played, then another, and another. Every attempted extortion by the Xoltan against a Kothro system. Each video cut off just as humanity's fleet came in to save the day. As the last counterattack began and that video faded out, Kasler felt his eyebrows draw together. Of course, he would leave this one for last. The video started like the others, with Zoltan demands and a show of force, but didn't end immediately with fire and death. Kasler sat back in his seat, expecting to settle in for a long wait, but someone had expertly edited the video. It jumped forwards in time repeatedly, with Emnon providing commentary on exactly what had been demanded, what had been procured, and just how impossible the Zoltan demands had been. Then came the fateful moment, when the Zoltan's impossible timetable ended with a tiny fraction of what they demanded undelivered. Then they did something that had Kasler up and out of his chair, ready to join the shouts of fury and cries of disbelief which spread through the council chamber. The depravity, forced indentureship. That is not even allowed of PWs, much less civilians. The video ended and the lights came back up. Every ambassador, except for a few of the Zoltan's staunchers, had taken to their feet, yelling and shaking their fists. The Zoltan ambassador simply sat there, an expression that took Kasler several moments to identify, for he had rarely seen it before. The man looked to be completely stupefied by what he'd seen. Good. Best time to strike a foe is when he's off balance. No. Damn it. Rules of the chamber can't address that situation. The entire reason for letting this video be shown is to provide rock-solid proof that the Elton commanders were, in fact, behaving as had been claimed. Still, if they did this to the Kothro, they probably did it to the others, and that we can address here. So? Yes, strike while he is off balance. Kasler leaned forward so he could look down at the Zoltan and spoke.
I believe this evidence is fairly conclusive, Ambassador, in showing that at least one of your commanders acted on blatantly illegal orders. I also believe, and it seems many others do too, that this video is sufficient proof, in addition to the other testimony we have heard from witnesses from other systems involved, that your government has committed some serious crimes against the member states of this council.